Do you know what we wouldn't have found if we would have stayed on the trail? The waterfall, the cliff. What is that?
Hello, Howard.
Hi, Mike. How are you doing? Nice to speak to you.
Yeah, nice to speak to you too. How are you?
I'm not too bad. How are you keeping?
I'm good. I love the shirt, by the way.
Oh, thank you very much.
Hi there, my little droogies.
Congratulations on the movie. I really enjoyed it, especially the new spin on the franchise. The first thing I wanted to ask you is for you and also for the writer of the original film. Do you consider this a reboot? I mean, why did you go with the same name? I mean, you could have given it a completely different name and just gone for a completely new film. Why the same name but a completely different take on the same style of film?
You know, so I have to take a couple steps back. So I read the script originally in 2017. It was the first time I read it. It was one of the first drafts of the script. And I remember reading it and it was Wrong Turn. I'm like, oh, okay, let's go. Bringing all my preconceived notions of what I thought Wrong Turn were as I read it.
Right.
And I was thrown for a complete loop. Holy buckets, like this is not your typical Wrong Turn. It kind of felt like a Wrong Turn movie for the first 40 pages. And then it just spun out of control. And it's kind of what I liked about it. And so, when Robert Kulzer, producer and executive at Constantine, he actually went to Alan and asked him, like, Alan, would you be interested in kind of giving Wrong Turn, like doing a Wrong Turn for nowadays, for like a 2016 or 2017, whenever he wrote it. And Alan was like, absolutely, that sounds like a blast. And so I think, in keeping the name and instilling some of the lore or the feeling of what Wrong Turn was, especially in that first half of the movie, I think that was important, especially to them, to make sure that, when people go into this, they think it's going to be one thing and it ends up being something else, which I think ultimately speaks to our themes that we're talking about in the film. That is, you want to prejudge somebody, you want to prejudge something, you want to stereotype, you want to think the story, you want to think somebody, that could get you in trouble. And so it just all fit together, and we just loved the fact that, not only did it do that, but we could breathe new life into an IP that, after 6 movies, where do you go from there other than doing more of the same? And I liked that they were bold in that decision making, and I liked that a studio, and Alan's a great writer, but like especially a studio wanting to make a bold decision like that and say, like, no, we're gonna go all the way with this. Like, and as a filmmaker, I'm like, yes, that's what I want to be a part of.
It's a story people know but don't talk about, except in whispers, like a ghost story.
I mean, you said that the original script dates back like 4 or 5 years, no? Which is kind of
2017. Yep.
Even in your wildest nightmares, I don't think you could imagine that what's gone on since kind of January with the storming of the Capitol and these kind of things. I mean, I don't know if you felt the same, but when I was watching the film, it just kind of felt like the same thing, but in reverse almost, in a way. Dude,
I'm telling you right now, like it was almost like Alan had a window into what was going to happen. Yeah. It's like he knew. But I think, there's been something brewing. And I think, back in 2017, I think everybody could feel it. Things, something was boiling, under the surface, and it finally exploded. And crazy enough, our movie, we shot the movie in the fall of 2019, and then 2020 happened, and we had no idea that was, about to take place. And so when we're sitting there cutting the film and in post-production finishing, and we're just like, I can't believe this, our world, what's happening in our world right now. It's like, it's what's happening in this movie. What is going on?
What is this place?
Guys! Ooh!
They don't come back.
something that I really appreciate about this take on the law of wrong turn is the fact that it gives more reasoning to why these people are killing. I mean, obviously they're different people in the woods than we're used to in wrong turn, but it kind of, we see their perspective, but it also gives kind of a perspective from the villains and from the protagonists, not at the same time. Was that always your idea from the onset? And sadly, there has been some criticisms for the film because it's thrown out of the window everything that went before, like these crazy kills. But I appreciated it so much more because it's kind of done away with all these crazy kills. There's still violence in there, and it does get very visceral. But at the same time, it's more of a thinking man's film. No, do you not think the same thing?
You know, from the get-go, I mean, again, like from the first draft, and you know, obviously, you know, we went through several drafts of the film to get it to where it needed to be, but from the get-go, you know, the film, you know, was talking about three very different groups of people, and those three different groups of people reactions to one another, and how those different groups of people judge and stereotype one another, and how that gets them all into trouble. That was something that immediately, like, you know, I could feel as like an undertone in the script, and really wanted to run with that. And I felt like that was it was even at the time that I read it, I felt like it was timely. I felt like it was something that, you know, we had been dealing with for such a long time. And I feel like, you know, making using a horror film to talk about the dangers of stereotyping. You know, you have, you know, a movie like Friday the 13th that was, you know, set back in the 80s when, you know, you were told by your parents in the Reagan era, you know, be a good kid, don't do drugs, you know, don't do drugs, you know, don't have sex, you know, you could get, you know, an STD. And then you have the Jason movies that are like, you have sex, you do drugs, you die. And in this movie, it was like, oh, like we're living in a completely different time now. You know, there's this feeling of, you know, it's so easy to go online and bash somebody that you don't know and you don't know anything about. And, you know, you can say anything you want, and you don't know that person's story, man. You know, and it's sad. And I think what's interesting about this movie is you see these three groups of people all fall into that trap, and you get to see how absolutely dangerous that is.
I mean, that's something that really sorry to interrupt you, but something I really appreciate was the fact that brutality, you see it from both perspectives, and brutality for one person isn't brutality for the other. And I just love that you tapped into that in the film. Yeah,
I mean, and that's something that, you know, we did a documentary behind the scenes piece for the film, and Alan was very adamant, you know, and you'll hear him say it. He said he wanted to explore the brutality of people's assumptions, and, you know, how those assumptions can really bring out, you know, something awful in people. And then to speak to your point about the cannibals, about, you know, Three Finger and Sawtooth and One Eye and stuff like that, you know, those were characters that, I mean, they're great. I mean, they're especially wonderful, you know, in the first movie, and you know, of course, you know, Three Finger in part 2 and so forth. And, you know, for me, I feel like, you know, you go through 6 movies, and why would you keep doing? Why not? Why would you keep doing the same thing?
Yeah.
Why, when you're given the opportunity to completely reinvent, you know, and Alan being the writer, the creator of these 3 characters that people fall in love with, realizing, you know, I think I need to do something different now. I think their story has been told. Here's a new story that I want to tackle. And I saw that as really refreshing.
I mean, oftentimes as well, I mean, things like Friday the 13th and like these kind of things, it's the less we know about the villain, the scarier they usually are. But this is exactly the opposite. I mean, you've dared, both of you, to kind of dive into, to tap into the kind of the beliefs of these villains, and you reveal who they are, especially the lead character now, who's just as menacing as the previous villains in the Wrong Turn franchise. But you must have been kind of concerned, not to take it too far, because if you tip the balance a little bit too far, pulls out the scary. So how did you approach that? Because to show too much of what you want to be scary, it's kind of precarious territory, no?
Well, I think that's what the first half of the movie does. I think the first half of the movie, you get to explore that feeling of who are these people? Who's actually behind this? Who's doing the killing? Who'd make these traps? Oh my gosh, these are our bad, psychopaths living in the woods. We get that piece. When you cross that, we'll say 50-minute hour threshold in the movie, and then you start to learn a little bit more, I think what happens is there's a shift. Not a complete 180.
No, yeah.
There's a shift in thinking, wait a second, who are the monsters? Who are the antagonists? And I mean, monsters, I think, is an extreme term, but when you think of antagonists and you think of, just the word antagonist, antagonistic, antagonizing, and you look at our protagonists and what they've done, they've been partially part of the cause of a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is driven by the fear that they have towards people they don't understand. And that's where introducing and getting to know who the villains are, I don't think you lose the fear so much because the tables turn. And you're right, it's a tricky balance. But it was a choice, it was a risk for sure, but it was a risk that we all really wanted to take. And I mean, we feel like we did it, we feel like it paid off, but I'll leave that to the audience. The movie belongs to you guys now. So
no, for me it totally paid off, especially because of, I mean, everyone was great in the film, but I mean, Bill Sage knocks it out of the park as the leader, and I think that was key to making you still kind of feel this menacing persona, no, even though he does speak so much in the film.
Oh, I mean, Bill was somebody that, what was so great about Bill and casting Bill was, and I think what gives him that sort of a character, a villain that you can really grab onto, is he does come across as this larger than life guy. He does come across as this leader who, you don't want to mess with this guy. And he makes that very clear. But there's strangely something human that I think as an audience can relate to, interestingly, which I think is an uncomfortable thing to think about, because he does have a very strong set of morals. And I think, I think most people like to pride themselves on the fact that, I have a moral compass. I feel like, I know my right and wrong, and I know, what I'm going to do and what I shouldn't do. And he is that way. And so when he is so, firm in his beliefs, there's something that you can't help but kind of like about that. And you can't help but understand some of his viewpoints. Now, his brutality of upholding those is where things start to get a little tricky, because, I think, the majority of an audience maybe is probably not going to get behind his whole, I'm going to smash your head and burn your eyes out, kind of thing. But that being said, that's where I think that challenging nature is of, and that's where some of that fear and uncomfortableness comes from watching his characters. You're like, oh God, oh God, oh God. And also that he's so damn flawed that, when he meets somebody like Charlotte or Jen, in this case, that something can also turn in him, and how that can turn him into somebody else, and somebody who's also, he can be even more, he can turn the menace up because of that.
Descendants of these people are still living up there on the mountain?
The film ends on a kind of a cliffhanger of sorts. It took me back to Texas Chainsaw Massacre days, really kind of grimy, gritty, really kind of got under my skin, that last scene. I don't want to give anything away. But have you got ideas between you and the writer of maybe possibly taking this further?
I'm not gonna lie. One of my favorite parts about doing has been about doing these interviews is being able to say that I'd really love to do another one, and nothing is official yet, but Alan and I have been talking.
They said they would be the foundation on which a new nation would be built.